I've watched that, I don't know how many times by now, and I still cry. I've been wondering how we will remember this year and what we may forget. How might we convey to the future what this year has been like? Towards that end, the rest of this sermon is in the form of a letter from us today to the future First Parish of 2040. Dear First Parish, as you gather to celebrate the 400th year of this congregation, we imagine there will be many moments in our history that draw your attention. As you consider all 4 centuries, we offer you these remembrances and reflections about this COVID-19 pandemic. On March 8, 2020, we held an in-person service for our annual stewardship campaign. The Reverend Dr. Stephanie May was homesick that day, and our ministerial intern Alex Jensen led the service, delivering Stephanie's sermon. Attendance was lighter than normal, only 71 rather than the usual 90 to 100 folks. Fears of the incipient pandemic keeping some away. Several days later, the parish committee met in person for its monthly meeting, sitting in the vestry at tables and chairs spread far apart. Following extensive discussion, the committee voted to close the building immediately, moving services and programs entirely online. Some had to be convinced of this immediacy. The governor, after all, had yet to shut down the state. This would not come until March 23rd. No one imagined the closure would last over a year. The next day, an email went out to the congregation. As our community, our connections to one another are foundational to who we are as a congregation. And yet, amidst this epidemic, we find that we must shift how we connect to each other to protect the health of those within and beyond these walls. Notably, the email used the word epidemic. The World Health Organization had just declared COVID-19 a pandemic the day before, but the language was too new to be the word we used. Over the coming months, pandemic would become a daily vocabulary. On that first online Sunday, March 15th, Reverend Stephanie and Alex Jensen stood in an empty sanctuary, speaking into an iPhone camera that was logged into Zoom. Dozens of congregants had downloaded and learned Zoom in the prior days. Together, we learned to mute and unmute, to add comments to the chat, and to change between speaker and gallery view. Even so, the technological curve remained steep. Andy Myers volunteered to run the Zoom, joining Alex and Stephanie in the sanctuary every Sunday into June, while all other service participants and attendees logged in from home. With the help of her partner, Dan, Polly Oliver, our music director, turned her living room into a music studio for her grand piano. Hymn leaders and other musicians followed suit, bringing music live each service from living rooms, kitchens, and home offices. In the same way, families lit homemade chalices, lay ministers lit candles of joys and sorrows, and dozens shared a reading, a welcome, or a prayer. As the first weeks passed, it started to become clear that Zoom was not going to work for some people. While some did not feel comfortable with the technology, others were spending so much time online for work or school that weekends had to be offline. Still others simply said no to remote connections. They will wait until we could gather in person again. While online services and events may have left traces in the archives of First Parish, so much of the heartbreak lived offline. All the unremarkable, normal patterns that wove family, friends, and strangers into shared social spaces shattered. With so much unknown about the virus, the fear felt boundless. Do we need to wipe down our groceries? How? No one has sanitizing wipes, bleach, or rubbing alcohol in stock. Heck, we struggled to find toilet paper. Suddenly, our covenant to care for one another meant offering up spare rolls or letting others know where they could buy some. As the need for social distancing remade every aspect of life, our previous everyday sociability was thrown into stark relief. No handshakes, no hugs, no casual lingering beside strangers at a restaurant, a coffee shop, or a public lobby. And perhaps most painfully, physical distances between our dearest friends and beloved family members grew as well. While some grandparents became part of the same bubble to help care for grandchildren as childcare closed down, other grandparents stayed safely distant as the high COVID risk for older adults became very evident. Babies were born, birthdays were celebrated, and all manner of life lived happened on Zoom, outdoor visits at a distance, or video calls. All of this was days, months, a year that would never come back. It would always be what it had been, something different than what we had imagined it would be. Somehow the mundane imaginings of hugging a grandchildren, dropping off kids for school at a school, or stopping for a quick bite at a restaurant with a friend all became unimaginable. The losses to our social and daily lives were staggering, as was the rising death rate. 50,000, 100,000, 250,000. At 300,000 deaths, we played a video of the First Parish Paul Revere bell ringing for 5 minutes during the Sunday service, each second marking 1,000 deaths. By 500,000 deaths, it wasn't even clear what could be done to adequately mourn so many lost. As the year passed, we adapted. Outdoor gatherings of small groups of friends and family felt safe to many. With fewer people traveling due to the risks and restrictions, summer services saw higher attendance. By the fall, we hired a fabulous tech coordinator, Matt, and the choir began using software to blend their voices into recordings of choral pieces, meeting weekly together online and spending untold hours alone with headphones and microphones to learn and record their parts. Kate Holland, our Director of Lifespan Education and Engagement, repeatedly dropped off packets of activities to families with kids. She and India Wood, our youth coordinator, began holding online youth group with another congregation. All the office mail forwarded to the home of our parish administrator, Karen Plaskon. When the piles became too high, Karen made a trip into the office, signing into the register for contact tracing by the locked door. She quietly kept the wheels of administration turning, along with our bookkeeper, Leo, and our treasurer, Bill Morrison. As the weather began to chill and the winter holidays approached, we began to ask, how could we adapt the magic of the winter holidays? Events so often spent with family, friends, and special services. As individuals, families, and a congregation, we experimented, learned, and shared ideas with one another. Many of us joined the choir to create special videos of Silent Night and Joy to the World. The rhythm of the year continued, even as the expression of familiar moments emerged in novel ways. And while this story we're telling can highlight our resiliency and adaptation, such learning often came from a place of necessity and pain. Again and again, we did what we did because it was all we could do in an effort to approximate our heart's longings. No matter what changes from this year may remain in the coming years, they will have been insights born from a place of loss and longing. For 12 months, we have not been able to sing together in shared space. For 12 months, we have not been able to gather in person to honor the lives of those we love who have died. The first service to be canceled was for Lou Russell in late March. Nor were we able to come together in person to celebrate the lives of Jean Pratt, Corinne Goles, Dorothy Dunlay, or Doug Case. While death is never easy, the restrictions on visiting the sick and the dying or gathering to celebrate the lives of those who had died robbed us of our normal rituals of comfort and support. So much has been different, so much has been lost. Graduations, retirements, weddings have all been impacted. From preschool through grad school, the social aspect of learning has frayed with online learning. And for those without adequate internet or technology, students simply fall farther and farther behind. Indeed, to speak of this pandemic and to not speak of the social injustices laid bare would be a moral failing. As a majority white congregation, we have had to wrestle with the racial gaps in healthcare, economic security, and disproportionate rates of COVID infection and death. At the same time, the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and so many other Black folks kindled protests across the nation, including at the corner of Boston Post Road and Route 27 here at our front lawn. Writing today, we can only hope that the future has become a more just place, and that Wayland and First Parish are now more diverse and radically welcome to Black and brown lives. We also hope that the thousands of postcards, phone calls, and dollars we gave to defeat an authoritarian president has helped to keep the U.S. a democratic nation. The fear of losing democracy on top of so many other losses fueled so many of us to act. And when the widespread rejection of the election results erupted into an attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, our already raw hearts broke anew. How could it be? At this 1-year mark, we know there is still a long path ahead of us. The anticipation of a quick return to normal faded some time back. Even so, a number of us have now been vaccinated, and there is a rising sense that something different may be on the horizon. This has been a hard time. In so many ways, we have learned just how capable we are at doing hard things. But to only celebrate the resiliency without also naming the loss and the pain would be to tell only part of the story. We hope this letter gives you a sense of what this year has been like. There is far more to say, and more that will inevitably become clearer as time passes. Whatever has occurred between our now and yours, We trust that our resiliency in the face of this pandemic has enabled First Parish to still be there for you and for all that you are facing in 2040. For what has been clear to us this year is that in the midst of hard times, the gift of religious community can be a lifeline. With hope and love, First Parish, March 7, 2021. Amen.